So, um, there was a lot of stuff going on in terms of our country, we know. And the things that happen here are almost so heinous after a while that most of our people felt there was no way out other than to join up with what the new country thought and wanted to do with itself. And that was that it wanted to reinstitute itself or re-graft itself to the world stage as always having been here and being more ancient than it really was. So we know the United States itself is very, very young, you know, and because of that, it didn't have its own. Mhm. And it just turned into something that is basically has been almost like a nightmare for all of us. But we never sometimes look at the root and the cause of certain things, you know. So when we look at it, our history is so illustrious in both sides of the hemisphere that we don't even remember how deep it goes. You know what I'm saying? But, or I should say, however, what we do know and what has happened is that we've been in a position where people have basically only shown us one side of our history. And based on that, it's created a fiction amongst us when it comes to looking at ourselves for who and what we really are. So where we are now as a people is striving to keep up with all of the drama that comes up as to who and what we are. So for instance, it's good. It's royal blues. For instance, here is Princess Leia, right? From Star Wars. But this is where she got her hairstyle from. This is a Hopi princess. Now the Hopis again were Moors. You know what I'm saying? They were Moors in that sense as well. Um, Also, this is the Infinity Gauntlet in comic books, but this is the Infinity Gauntlet in real life. This is actually the petrified hand of the last Moorish king of a place called Sardinia that was hacked off by one of the last warrior popes of Sardinia before they moved it to Rome and cast inside of this solid silver and gold encrusted gauntlet that sits in the Vatican and that they call the right hand of God. Again, a Moor's hand that was lapped off. This is what it looks like in the comic book realm, how they translated the story. Therefore, the person who owns the glove, his name is Thanos or Thanos in the comic books, as well as in the at the end of the new Avengers movie. He represented you and I in our cosmic self. In our cosmic understanding, any star gods or anything like that always represent you. So it's to show you how your little things like your hairstyle wind up becoming iconic things once the so-called enemy races start to emulate them. You understand? Let's see. Let's see. Yep. Actually, let's go to something else first. Let's see. Your time as Asiatic on this world is not measured by regular time. It's measured by your internal time, meaning the time of which you chose to incarnate here and then manifest who and what you are. Within that given time frame is what we're all supposed to be doing. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. This is a picture of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. This is him from life, right? This is the Caucasian, what they call the anglicized version of the true Moor. But this is Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, this picture was found in a classical radio station in Belgium. It was a painting. These were the Moors that introduced the classical music to Europa. The image on the right is the anglicized version. So you're always going to see the real version of who you are, and then you're going to see the fake version of who you are. You know what I'm saying? That's because the lie of Reconstruction has reconstructed the world to believe that we are cut off at the knee, meaning that we are Negroes and do not have our own history. This is a picture of Beethoven, the Moor. Beethoven, or Bey, right? Te Ovan was the son of a Bey consul who resided at Paris. He was called the Moor at his king's court. He's called the Moor at his king's court. His music changed the world forevermore and forever since. This is why his music creates and stimulates high pineal function. The music balances all chakras at once. That's why they tell you to let your babies listen to classical music, specifically Wolfgang Mozart or Amadeus. Is it any coincidence then that because they're both Moors, that their music was so prolific in the world? Speaking of that, back in the 60s, out of Philadelphia was a doo-wop group called the Turbans. And the Turbans were on a record. It's interesting. Their record label that they signed to was called Red Top Records. Now we know the red top represents the Red Fez. Then they signed to Imperial Records. Then I believe it was Dizzy Gillespie's brother or somebody decided to become their manager. And exactly, Beethoven, exactly, is a Bay in that. Anyway, the Turbans were real big, and their hit "When You Dance" was circulated all around the world and all that. And in fact, because the fact that they was Moors, basically, they really didn't have um, any of the contractual problems and stuff that a lot of doo-wop groups had in the 50s. Also, they were from the Philadelphia territory. This is around the same time as the Temptations. Actually, this is before the Temptations. No, this is right around the same time, or like a little right before that. Anyway, Conscious Moors doing doo-wop music. So this was also to show you. I showed this to show you this to show that you get more and people notice you more when you exist in your true habit and your true culture than you do when you don't. You know what I'm saying? So just something to always put out there because we've never heard. Has anybody ever heard of the Turbans? Exactly, but we done heard of everybody else, right? We done heard of the Spinners and the Barcades and the Honey Drippers and everything else, right? Yeah. Yeah. In the 12th century, the reconquest of Spain by warrior kings and men like El Cid. Excuse me, this is a little later. In the 14th century, reconquest of Spain by warrior kings like men like El Cid ended the Moorish occupation, reestablished new Christian states in Spain and Portugal. By the 15th, 16th centuries, the Inquisitions began to purge Moors from the two nations. In 400 years' rule, many Moors had intermarried with Europeans and taken European surnames. See? This was the denationalization, guys. Although Moorish occupation had allowed for the freedom of religion amongst Christian and Jews, no such tolerance was given back to the Islamic Moors. Following the reconquest, most faded into the background of the nations where they settled and never disclosed their ancestry. You see that? You see that? The Moors specifically never disclosed their ancestry because they know that through the Reconquista, they was trying to kill as many Moors as possible. Because the Moors represented the true Sangreal or bloodline of the Merovingian, right? So the Inquisitions, however, grew unchecked against the Moors, and the national cannibalism of ethnic cleansing led many kings to look for other ways to handle the duties of both church, state, and nation. By the 16th century, King Philip II of Spain began sending thousands of Moors into exile rather than executing them, with two conditions. For diplomatic reasons, they would not be resettled in Europe. See that? For diplomatic reasons, they would not be resettled in Europa, and they could not return to their home to northern Africa, where latent hostilities might be reignited against the Spanish. The Moors were loaded up onto ships and sent on their way to other lands. Two such ships recorded reaching the ports of China and India, but were refused entry, fearing that they were escaped slaves. Most of the ships were never heard from again. In 1567, a Spanish ship under the command of Captain Juan Pardo, an officer of the Portuguese origin, meaning that he was a Morisco, right? Approximately 250 Moorish soldiers and settlers landed near Beaufort, South Carolina, traveled inland to the Georgia interior, and began building forts and settlements in the region to prepare for an eventual road that would cross the territory. The crew brought along a chemist familiar with smelting ores, and the party also mined North Georgia region for gold and silver. These are the Moors, right? Captain Pardo returned to the coast, never again traveled inland to the forts he established. You see that? This is where your Moorish connection, or why your Moorish connection is so cut off. Because a lot of people are scared of the fact of who and what you are and what you represent. You represent the people who were dispossessed all over the planet. And because everybody on the planet is descended from you, everybody owes you. The problem is they separated us based upon a lot of Moors using surnames that were not their own. Okay? This is why you are not to be called outside of your given name. Or you're supposed to know the difference between your given name, your surname, your free national name, and your divine name. This is why our people always had more than one, because each one represented a different chakra. Okay? Get this all up. Now look at this image. This is a Moorish cavalry in Opelika, Florida, from 1890. This picture. Opelika in Florida was a huge Moorish community out here in Florida. Remember, anything that says Spanish came from Moorish, right? Therefore, the Spanish people today are being treated the way that they're treated because they're really Moriscos. They're really the Spanish that helped dispossess everybody else. Yeah, your divine name could be your crown chakra. Now, everybody knows, again, um, the story of Solomon and Sheba. Now, Solomon and Sheba had a son named Melanic. That's this guy. He is the true king of kings from the place they call Ethiopia. See, Ethiopia is one thing, Ethiopia is something else. Lost this picture. Damn. You know what I'm saying? It's one thing, that's something else. I'm sorry, I just lost this picture. Hold up 1 second. Also, it became a situation where a lot of people, our people specifically, felt that if we didn't represent ourselves based upon the environment or the country that we happened to be staying in at the time, that and they found out that we were Moorish ancestry, that they would somehow put us back in the context of what was going on in old Spain in terms of us having to fall under the stipulations of the Reconquista. See, when we fell to our own brothers and sisters. Excuse me, our own lighter skinned brothers and sisters. You know what I'm saying? And that essentially created a stance that destroyed our ability to discern our enemies from, I guess, our friends, if you will. And that essentially created it burst a bubble of real uh, trust amongst our people, because you had people who were Moors who were selling other Moors into slavery and into situations to be trapped. You know what I'm saying? And also put them in harm's way in other positions. Also, there was a huge instance of taking Moors and making them into indentured servants. Thank you, man. And making them into indentured servants by also holding on to their estates. And the problem is, the real issue is that we as original people have been separated from our estates. And so most of us are forced to deal with, for the most part, the only thing that most people can really or have heard of specifically are trusts. And a trust is cool. You know what I'm saying? But a trust without an established estate is not something that you will last long. Also, the only way that somebody can be thrust out of their position is if they have abandoned their estate. And essentially, what the Europeans are going to flip on us or flip on you is the fact that you, if you calling yourself a Moor, you descend from those people that they exile. And they exiled because, in my opinion, the Moors in Spain were a little bit too tolerant for what they were really dealing with. and who they were really dealing with in terms of the people. They were very, like I said, almost too tolerant in letting everybody rock. However, that's the principle of love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, and equality. So even though they were supposed to be lenient and merciful, they weren't supposed to be so tolerant that they were to abandon their own estates in that land. You see? Because what happened was once they started to leave, the devil started looking at it like, well, these people didn't really value what they had because they really gave it up without a fight. So maybe they're not the big, strong Moors that we thought they were. And now we are justified in what we're doing. Because remember, that whole Reconquista in Spain was ordained really by the Pope and the Vatican. You know what I'm saying? But we know the Pope and the Vatican, in a sense, got their permission to exist from what? The Holy Roman Emperors, right? But weren't they Moors too? So why, when we have beef with each other, it's always things like black on black crime or you know, whatever, you know what I'm saying, in terms of crime and shit like that. But why is it when there's more white people that kill white people than kill anybody else? How come how come we don't call that white on white crime? Well, because white folk always been killing each other. You know what I'm saying? And they always been in situations where they've been trying to fight and scavenge whatever they can for land. You know? And based on that, they're always in a position where they're trying to really take yours because they are not really from anywhere like you are. They're only from wherever you brought them to. And then once you brought them there, they dispossessed you from that place. So whenever we created a kingdom, and then the kingdom started to be overrun by the foreigners, and then in turn these foreigners started to create other positions for them to rule, we wind up getting the short end of the stick and wind up bouncing out of the whole situation and then just going and setting up shop somewhere else. The problem with that, though, is because we always own the land. Now, today, Ethiopia is right here, right? But look at what this is. This is an old map. Ethiopia was all the way in the interior, going all the way down to South Africa. What's up with that? Also, how is the Sudan all the way over into the Midwest where Mali and all of that stuff was at? Because I said so. Because I don't want it to go in Anita's steps. You know what I'm saying? So, one, this shows you that the maps have definitely been changed on you. So that way you have no depth of perception. And Abyssinia is still here because Abyssinia is the empire, is the country. Ethiopia or Ethiops was the empire that was extended through Abyssinia. You see? But again, this was the French and so-called European way of exposing it and expressing it. Right? Peace. People. So when we talk about the Christian kings of Europa and all of that, we're really talking about black people. See how similar? Look at the eye pattern in this of Christopher II of Denmark, and then look at this of an ancient Candace from so-called Abyssinia. It's the same thing because it's the same people. Has anybody ever seen? Well, yeah, you've probably seen it. So this is an excerpt from the Asiatic calendar, brought forth by Nation of Gods and Earths, but it used to exist. It used to be called the calendar of the triple stage darkness in old Nation of Islam stuff, right? So 78 trillion years ago, the creation of the sun took place in our universe. The sun, which is the universe, which is our universal flag. That's why the universal flag of the nation of gods of earth is the sun. Right? 76 trillion years ago, the creation of the earth took place in our universe. The earth and the moon at this time was joined together, right, as Al Asia. And for about 10 trillion years before the deportation of the moon from the earth, this took place 76 trillion years ago. 72 trillion years ago, we had the creation of the stars that started to take place in our universe, right? 66 trillion years ago came the deportation of the moon, right? At this point, we began to renew our history every 25,000 years instead of every 35,000 years due to the change in the Earth's circumference brought on by the deportation between the sun and the moon, between the Earth and the moon. Okay? That the miles then were now reduced to 24,896 miles. So every time we reach 25,000 years, we renew our history. We go back to year zero and start our history over another 25,000 years. We just did that on December 21st, 2012. Right? The 23rd Quran cycle, the 22nd Quran cycle starts from 15,020 to 50,000 years ago. This is when great granddaddy Shabazz took his family into the jungles of what we call Africa. Now we know Africa means earth, right? So the jungles of earth to prepare for our physical compositions in the future. So Shabazz was the scientist that existed before Yaqub, and Shabazz brought forth the trait within our people, because our people, as we came out of the triple stage darkness, you have to remember that at the time they called it triple stage darkness because there was no light. So being that there was no light back then, we were the light. We were the suns and the moons that brought forth the light out of the darkness. Therefore, once the sun, in a sense, was manifested as a physical artifice of Akashic energy, we then began to transmute our DNA to encompass it with a chemical that would allow us to translate the light form or the light source into energy. That is melanin, which is the physical product of the triple stage darkness. Everybody following? Okay. The 23rd Quranic cycle started. Then about 5020, we get the first Buddha left Mecca, or left the Holy Lands that we call Mecca, to teach knowledge, wisdom, and understanding the culture. He was the first manifestation of the energy of the Ka, Ra, Ya, Sa, Ta, right? Which is the Christ. Then boom. The Asiatics, then 24,020 years, the Asiatics who left Mecca at 16,000 years ago and moved to the Americas. Okay? This era right here is what we're talking about when they talk about how the Indians was exiled from India. These Asiatics who left Mecca 16,000 years ago, these were the family or those descendants of granddaddy Cush and Ham and them that wanted to come back over here, but had to do it now as Moabites or Moabites. Okay? And as you can see, there's Bible verses with all of these. Okay? So I showed that to you to get you in the context. Because when we say 78 trillion years ago, you can't even really fathom that with a human brain. However, with the Asiatic comprehension, you can facilitate that in the realm of your existence to show that there's never been a time that you have not existed. You understand? That's why they say that the Nation of Islam has no birth record. This is why you have to correct your birth record, you see? Because in correcting your birth record by putting il and bay at the end, you're taking your history back to that 78 trillion years and back to the creator itself. because those Moors who believe that they descend from the Moabites, well, first of all, what does the word descendant mean? Anyone? What does the word descendant mean? To go down. That's interesting, right? Hold up. Let's see. Well, yes, the word descent means to go down. That's true. Hold up. But let's look at it for true, because we got to be right, correct, and exact if we can help it, right? Okay. Descendant, a deceased person, an individual who has died. The term literally means one who is dying, right? One who is dying, departing, withdrawing. So, on one hand, you're a descendant. If you say that you are a descendant, then what are you saying? If you say that you're a descendant from the Moors, what are you saying? You're saying that you're somebody that's on their way out, right? Somebody that's dying. That's why you don't use that term in reference to yourself. When you talk about the people you come from, you don't use the D word for descendant. You use the A word for what? Don't say ascendant. What's another way? Or Tongton? Yeah, that's true, but that's not the word I was looking for. No, ancestors. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. Your ancestors. That's right. Because ancestry is different from descent. The line of ancestry is alive. The line of descent is dead. You understand? So you always have to function with your ancestry, not based upon who you are descent from. So, in that same regard, then, you can say you are of African descent, but Moorish ancestry. You see that? See how it works? You have African descent because the Africans fell, right? No, you say your ancestry as opposed to your descendants. Your descendants represent those people who are no longer in their natural position, meaning people who are on their way out, meaning people who are dying. So you can't say that you are the descendant of the Moors. You can't say that because the Moors ain't dead. You could say you're a descendant of Africans. So the proper way would be to say that you are of African descent, but Moorish ancestry, or your ancestry comes from the Moors, because ancestor means alive, descendant means dead. Now, in speaking of dead relatives, you can speak of your relative as your descendant because they're actually dead. You have to understand that as a Moor, you have a lot of different capacities. But specifically, as a Moor, as a spirit, living spirit created in the image of the Almighty Creator, Mother, Father, Father, Mother, God, you occupy two main positions, or exist within two main positions. One is in the realm of the estate, the other is in the realm of the trust, or the estate's trust. The estate is that of God. Let's see. The estate is a realm of action that is a combining of the physical and spiritual aspects of each individual. This should be individuum, excuse me. Of each individual. The estate is older than any form of law or legal issue that is in or around the world today, and has been passed down through generations, having come from God, having come from the 78 trillion years ago that you finally descended out of the triple stage darkness into physical matter. That was an estate that you came out of. Okay? Existing in the perpetual realm of the Creator was your original estate. That's where you came from. So like I said, your descendants represent that part of your ancestry that was dying out. And that is the so-called African or the non-nationalized part of yourself. Your ancestry represents your living history. So we can put it like that too. Descent represents dead history. Ancestry represents living history. Right? Ancestry represents the estate, right? And descent then represents the trust. Okay? That's right. That's where that term comes from. Never say die. That's where that comes from. Scripture is a trust and estate law. Scripture is a trust and estate law and trumps all other, i.e., treaty, civil, criminal, law of nations, domestic, probate, equity. Right? Yes, exactly. Exactly, Mike. Mikael Bay. Yes. So descending is the descend or descending from Africa or to Africa. Yeah, from Africa, which is basically dead earth. Right? Then ancestor is then spiritual to ascend and is living. Right? True law has to be simple. True law has to be simple and work equally for everyone. Equality. UCC is not contract law because there is not full disclosure. You see? UCC is man's law. There's no sovereignty in that. That's just by trade of another man. As such, one cannot operate as the occupant, meaning Moor or Asiatic, of the office, and then attempt to operate in a different capacity as a citizen of the United States as well, i.e., as a trustee or beneficiary in a trust, 14th Amendment, right? Or even in a different capacity. For example, as a damaged party or citizen, in order to be able to bring legal action into something that would be termed as a lower court, Negro court, with less power than the executive office. To do this would be indicative of having a double mind. See? Straw man, living soul. A house divided cannot stand. Let's say that again. One, as such, one cannot operate as the occupant, right, of the office. The occupant of the office of the estate is called the executor of the office. How many people have heard any Moors talk about that? Have they told you how to set it up? Okay. When you function in the executive office of the estate, you deny everyone from exercising a presumption of authority to administer the estate. Thus, the executive office would or should have no reason or need to ever consider a legal action in a lower system, as the office has the authority to submit either an order or request to the lower office enforcement holders to perform corrective actions. The executive office is the court, as the sovereign is in equality. Definition of Black's law: sovereign with their real retinue, or retunye, depending on how you speak it, wherever they may be, is the executive office. Therefore, when you sit as executor of the office of your estate, that is the perpetual state of Morocco, also known as the Moorish temple. The body of Kara Yasata, which is Christ, amen. Amen, meaning Moorish American national. The estate is in all caps, is the all caps name. Adding the ill to the estate unifies both halves of the government. The Free National Constitution through the birth record certificate, and the Divine National Constitution through the SSN, and the Zodiac Constitution under a unified mind and body of the Ka, Ba, and the Ra. As executor, you don't have to go and undo past wrongs. You just basically say to what it is, and then they got to do it. So the temple is earth, right? That's you as a Moor, an emissary, a sheik, a consul, an envoy, a Moorish American national. That's earth. That great seal pyramid that you see on the dollar, or any physical seal that you create. That's you now dealing, when you deal on earth, when you're dealing within the temple, that's the function of it. When you're dealing with the estate, that's the executor of the office, the occupant, his or her eminence, as it is in heaven. That great seal has no earthly seal. That great seal is your thumbprint, because that's the God and the spirit. That's the image of God as spirit. Your thumbprint is evidence that you were created by God. Therefore, what you do in the estate is different than what you do for the trust, which is the temple. So Noble Jew Ali, why he is the man amongst men, is because he was the only one out of all of your black leaders. Exactly. Hence your fingerprints look like spiral galaxies. He was the only one in our history, in this country at least, in our modern history in this country, to create an estate for you and a trust for you. That once you access and reestablish and redeem your personal estate, your all capital name, right? You then have an earthly estate that you can be involved with too. The operating in the executive office entails that all acts or actions of the executive are done to expand or increase the estate and better our fellow man and woman, i.e., uplift fallen humanity, as commanded by the Prophet Noble Jew Ali, first executive of the first estate, Yehoshua, and the first executive of the first estate, who is Yehoshua. That's why the Prophet said, "Don't throw away your Bibles, Moors. I'm going to have you have need for them later." The act of high treason and conspiracy to conceal the 18th and 20 sections constituting the 13th Amendment to the Free National Constitution of the United States, the Articles of Confederation. As stated, the 13th Amendment is the law which called for the emancipation of the slaves, the whites, a general post registration, you see, meaning that you register your estate through general post. When you fill up your stuff with general post, you are reestablishing and redeeming your estate, because you are taking the postal jurisdiction from a magisterial jurisdiction to a majesty jurisdiction, or excuse me, to an estate jurisdiction. Everybody understand? So the trust is evidence. So Moorish Science Temple of America is a vast estate trust. The grantor of that trust is the Prophet Noble Jew Ali, right? That's the grantor of the trust. The beneficiary of the trust is you and me, right? Now that is Moorish Science Temple of America as the trust. But Moorish Science Temple now, the individual, you also have an estate that has not been claimed. That estate is your name in all capital letters. That unredeemed, right, is a corporation. But redeemed becomes an estate that you have dominion over, or full dominion over, based upon the fact that the estate was created for you. You understand? So when the devil comes out and says, oh, you know what I'm saying, he start calling you out of your name and all of that, he's doing that because he don't want you to catch on to the fact that your estate is what it is, and that your estate is functioning without you. What's happening basically is that the devil is acting as the trustor of your estate, and he has made you the trustee. So what that means is that the trustee is the one with all the liability. You dig? So you don't want to be the trustor. You don't want to be the trustor. Yehoshua is Jesus Christ, or the person they call Jesus Christ. See, the bottom line, as we really bring it down, is the fact that the entire structure of the world and the original inhabitants of the world are the only ones that are really considered as human. Everybody else is an abstraction. Everybody else is a creation of one of the original branches. Therefore, they are not functioning along the same lines of humanity as you are. Believe it or not. So what that constitutes then is the ability for you and I to establish ourselves in the right way. Somebody took it off? It's whack. These things take the bike. The bike's in the front. We'll walk around the building. Yeah. Because I asked you where it was yesterday. You said it was on the side of the bike. And I didn't see it there. And yesterday, both you and Maya were riding the bike, right? Did you? So when there, you send those summons. Okay. Yes. Once the executor steps into the office, everybody else has been committing fraud. So you see here on your picture, you see the Moors right here bagging up the Caucasians in the Midwest, putting ropes around them and leading them away. See the turbans? See that, right? Then you see how the Moor's standing right here on the land. Everything that this Moor got on, he done got off the land. There's nothing that he's wearing that hasn't come from something that was natural. Therefore, these are the original people. This is not a sign of destituteness or primitiveness. This is a sign of autochthonicness. When you could be so free on your land that you could just be totally naked. This is the executor. You see? This is you. This is you as the executor. So as the executor, you don't have to show and prove anything to nobody. Yes, the executors in the court are acting as executors or as executus de santort. That's right, which is a fraud. That's why when you establish your executive letter, you got to do it in the proper way so they don't try to flip that on you. But there's a definite way to do so. Like I said, it's just it takes a certain degree of patience and understanding. So you got to understand, our people come from this White Slavery in Barbary States. There's a great book to get by Charles Sumner. Another book they did, The Tragedies of the White Slaves. This is how we was rolling with these things. We was going hard. Now, the only way that the white slaves, emancipated slave children. Remember, I told you that the emancipation was about freeing these people, not you, because you were not enslaved at the time. You, as a free Moor, conscious Moor of your nationality, were not enslaved at the time of that. At the time of that, right? So essentially, what this means is that as the executor of the estate, as executors of our own estates, our own individual estates, we have to establish them. And once they're established, then we can create a confederation. You understand? That of estates that can fully come up with divine legislation, if you will, that would allow us to do the things we really need to do. But first, everybody got to become an estate first. You understand? This is the There's another book you should get. Seneca Possessed. Indians, Witchcraft, and the Power in the Early American Republic. See all the Moors, right? When we went dormant, we became Negroes. You see how these little Moors only are growing up to the knee or halfway? Smaller to allow these people to step up. It's a great book to get. Because the Seneca are related to the Senegalese, the Seneca or the Senegalese through the Malian excursion over here back in the day. Get this book too. Wild Frenchmen and Frenchified Indians. The Material Culture of Race in Colonial Louisiana. Also get this thing too. The Civil War of 1812. American Citizens, British Subjects, Irish Rebels, Indian Allies. Very great book. See us here again bagging up the Europeans? Excuse me, the Caucasoid slaves? Moving them. Always moving them to the east, to the eastern seaboard, because anytime they were captured, they had to send them back to the colony. So, like I said, when it comes to establishing the estate always dwells in the realm of God. It does not dwell in the realm of man. Therefore, one cannot use that instance, use the estate to settle anything with commerce. The estate is just there to execute what has to be done. So everything that you write as the executor should come through an executor letter. He's acting. This is the sanguia side. This is where all of the men have to put their face into when they do the circumambulation around Mecca. This represents the black woman's womb or vagina. This is the meteorite that they all kiss, the black stone that they all kiss when they go around. This is the Vesica Pisces, which is the Christian version of this, right? Yeah, white gold is good too, right? This is the egress of the three ways of light of the energy that comes out of the vagina. The invoking energy spraying out or coming out, right? The triban is energy both coming in. So that is when the man is inside the woman and she's also stimulating herself. Then the evoking is the coming out of the essence, right? Therefore, everything in physical life is a mirrored representation of the lingam and the yoni. Everything that we are seeing is an aspect of one or the other. Okay? Now we talked about the riff. We talked about the riff and how the riff was basically just running and rocking with everything. And the so-called Somali pirates and all of that, they always been around. Again, these are the riff. So when you see this garb, you see all of these Moors dressed in all white. When you look at the KKK in them, you see them wearing the same thing, because the KKK is essentially emulating the riff, the mighty riff sheiks in that context. Thank you. In that context, by turning all of the Negroes into slaves on land. This was the money from the state bank of the riff, because the Moors, we always got our bread. So when people try to act like pirates were just lawless people burying their treasure, I'm showing you that these pirates, these Moorish pirates, had banks and had gold and silver behind their money. Yeah, there's a movie called Captain Something with him with the Somali pirates, Tom Hanks. If you notice, he always do movies about admiralty, like he did Castaway, and then he always do movies where he Cloud Atlas, where he's like on a boat doing some crazy shit like that. Exactly, Forrest Gump, exactly, with the boat and all of that, right? This is from something else where it says, there's still another way in which men of black hair or complexions have come to England as the thralls of Norse invaders. In his translation, Orosius, King Alfred, right, inserts the account which others, the Norse mariner, gave him the tribute, in which skins and egerton and whalebone and ropes were made from whale and seal skins, which the northern Finns, now called Lapps, paid to the Northmen. Their descendants, there's that word again, their descendants are amongst the darkest people of Europe. They just told you the Lapps, the Finns, the Normans. And as they were thralls, some of them may have accompanied their lords. The Danes and the Norse, having the general race characteristics of tall, fair men, must have been sharply distinguished from the appearance from the Vikings, such as those of Jomberg, for many of these were probably of a dark complexion. There is an interesting record of the descent of the dark sea rovers on the coast of northern Wales in the Amiels and the Cambria under the year 987, which tells us that Gothrit, son of Hardal, with black men, devastated the Anglesia, the Anglesey, and captured 2,000 men. Yes, slavers. Another entry in the same record says that Merida redeemed the captives from the black men. So I'm showing and proving to you that the Vikings is black people that was enslaving white people, and that these white people eventually, because of breeding with them, wind up learning how to flip these ships, and then started taking they fate into their own hands. So the origin of the Anglo-Saxon race, again, the Anglos and the Saxons were Moors. What kind of Moors? Let's see. Dark complexioned, right? Possible some of these dark Vikings, right? Dark Vikings may have been allies, allies or mercenaries from the south of Europe. It is as regards to evidence concerning the black-haired settlers in Europe, England. Now remember, there was no England in 987. That place was Albion. So where are they talking about? They said that these mercenaries, these Moors, came from the south of Europe. South Europe is, what is that? Spain, ain't it? Right. So we're a lot more closer to European affairs as possible, because it seems like we don't, Europe or none of that bears any relevance. It only bears relevance to us, because they still haven't explained where these devils was at. The first and the last, and the last and the first. These are the two U's. When you sleep, your spiritual pineal cord or umbilical cord allows you to rise up. Your human body and your astral body is connected through the silver cord, or what the Bible refers to as the scarlet cord. The silver cord is the astral body connection. The scarlet cord is the umbilical cord, the physical. So the astral body, again, is the estate, the dwelling place of the occupant, right? The physical body is the trust, the representation of the estate on earth as it is in heaven, right? The mental atom is the pineal organ, working in conjunction with the pituitary hypothalamus. And the pituitary and hypothalamus, right? So these things that we call chakras are also melanin molecules, non-physical, that manifest out of the spiritual chamber that you access in your waking life. So as you can see, there is a connection from the pineal, right, as well as from the midsection, the midheaven. Okay, this is why in trying to alter our perception of the brain by embossing it with these demons, they were able to unite the fiction history into the so-called Moors of the world and get us to denationalize ourselves. What is another name of another name for denationalization? Yeah, the result of denationalization is slavery, no doubt. But what is another name for denationalization? No, that's freedom. That's transferring ownership.
That's what I thought it was. Transfer ownership.
Hmm. Another name? No, amalgamate. No. Another name. Can you denationalize an estate?
No.
No, you cannot. What is the only thing that you can do to a state other than maintain it?
Break it up, divide it.
Abandon it. That's right. Abandon. So when the Moors started to adopt European surnames, they abandoned their estates. When the Moors stopped dressing in their natural habit, without their fezzes and turbans and all of that over here, they abandoned their natural estates for the gods and the chief estates of Europa. From Moors and people who have been jealous of them for so long for all of what they did to them. After the Moors were expelled from Spain, Spain went into a whole 200 years of darkness. That is really when the Dark Ages started, really. Because that's when all of Europe was now plunged back into a system of straight up mindless control. And the people who benefited during that time were the church, because now they could reinstitute a level of cultural amnesia on the descendants of the Moors who did not value what their forefathers gave them. Those descendants of the Moors today are the people today we call Spanish, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Portuguese, Brazilian, South American. You understand? All of those people were disinherited. And who took control of it? The church, through what? The Sestuí trusts, which were created in 1666. And we have been abandoned from those estates ever since. So it is our responsibility, Moors, to reestablish our estates. But you don't do that by nationalizing, because nationalizing is something that exists on earth. You understand? So on earth, in dealing with trust situations, this is why having a nationality works for us. Because most people, yes, the Sestuí Trust of 1666. But remember, at that time, 1666, we were not slaves. Remember? You weren't a slave in 1666. Who was the slave in 1666? That was somebody else. That wasn't you. That was the Eurozoids, right? So that means that the Sestuí Trust, as it was created or set up, was really set up for members of your family to look out for those members of your family that was over here or was farting around in the colonies and stuff and had no knowledge of where they was at or how to receive a return on their investment. So what they had to do was create a constructive trust that would allow them to be able to have something in terms of being able to redress their grievance and get their money back, And then at the same time, pick up one of the damn slaves that was out there and who was just walking around willy-nilly acting like they had autonomy, and they didn't. Always to make it difficult. This is why you are not supposed to. So when Moors tell you to rescind your birth certificate, what are they doing? What are they telling you to do?
To give up your estate. To give up the
To give up your estate, or what your estate?
Abandon.
Yes, they trying to get you to abandon your estate. I just showed and proved to you that that sovereignty, that this even trumps sovereignty, because this has nothing to do with man. Your estate has nothing to do with man. So when you create your executive letters to reestablish your estate, you do it through the seat of government. What is the seat of government in the United States? The post office. That's right. So when you create your executive letter and you start to function on General Post, when did General Post come into existence on Earth? What was it to show? Well, first, where did it start? Well, the United States Post Office started in 1971. Where did the General Post start?
I would say either in Washington, Chicago.
Nope, not 1800s. I'm gonna tell you right now. I'll read it to you. The General Post Office has its beginning in Scripture and is established and continued by the postal treaties. General Post Office is the post office generally. The post treaties are a general to the post. You see? Meaning that they're under the General Post. Meaning all postal treaties, United Union, are under the General Post, because the General Post is the General Post generally. Meaning that it's all information. It represents all information as physical matter. The post office is the largest bank in the world and has most of the branches, biggest banks in the world. The post office actually begins in Jeremiah 51:31, which says, "One post shall run to meet another, and one messenger shall go to meet another, and to show the king of Babylon that his city is taken at one end." Therefore, Jeremiah 51:31. Therefore, that means that the first post office in history was created at the fall of Babylon, to show that Babylon the Great, or the extension or jurisdiction of Babylon, no longer existed over this person. Therefore, when you set up General Post and establish your estate, the estate which is the state which is Babylon, you are now letting them know that your estate has been reestablished in the kingdom of God. That's why they don't talk to you about it. That's why they want you to believe that you can only get General Post for 30 days. That is if you are changing your address. But if you are a transient, you can receive the mail so long as your address is the General Post address, which means your address, once it's established properly, will be the post office, the General Post Office, where you pick up your general mail. Therefore, to do this is very simple.
Next week's class, stay tuned. Sunday, come back.
Set it up.
No, I'm laughing because Aseer will go over. It's an hour class, so I don't ever want you guys to be delayed in doing other things in your day from 12 to 1. So we start at 12:15. I'm trying to get him to finish in an hour at 1:15.
Okay, let's take the time for me to finish right now. This is the instruction manual that we our Moorish Science Temple have created called the Postal Restante, or the Loca Futicitas Obsita Postal Restante, which means the Moorish General Post. And in it, it has the explicit way that you're supposed to set it up, how it's supposed to do it, why it's supposed to happen, and then how you're supposed to exacerbate it after, how you're supposed to maintain it. The estate, like I said, runs incongruent with your trust. So what we have to do is, as Moors, reestablish our estates. So those of us that are interested in doing that in class, like I said, you can email me and we can build with this. This has nothing to do with UCC. This don't have nothing to do with none of the bullshit. This is about really establishing you and learning how to function in your true capacity. So like I said, we have the books and everybody. Everybody that wants to do their public notices, email me directly and we can do so. Also, for those people that want to come in class, like I said, next Wednesday, you can do so. And anybody who wants to set up the private consultation to start, how to generate their posts and everything else, holla at me, houseofl@hotmail.com. Those people that are already in the process, waiting for their letters to come back from the Bureau of Vital Statistics or is about to do it, again, just email me, text me, let me know what the status is on that, and we'll continue. Okay? Like I said, this is about us establishing our general post. So what We Are Moorish Science Temple is going to be is it's going to be a confederation of estates who also have general post consoles set up that would then allow us to do the business that eventually set up the so-called United States and everything else. But we can't do it. Being a part of Moorish Science Temple is cool, but that's the earthly aspect. So that's our earthly protection. Our spiritual protection represents the estados, yes, estados estates. Yes. Exactly, my brother. That's why we end with estados, because really the term, actually they took the term estate off of your birth certificate. So technically it's supposed to be all capital letters, comma, estate. They just took the E off estate and put the state part in as the geographic location. So like I said, this is the manual to basically set it up. We'll have those for sale upon demand, as well as those people that are ready to do they post for our We Are Moorish Science Temple General Post Office site for our notaries and all of that. Let me know. So again, email me at houseofl@hotmail.com. Thank you guys again for coming into our Moorish Sunday School. This is always great to have you guys.
The $20 donation.
Thank you for the $20 donation. In terms of that,
know that this is not free, man. I gotta get paid.
the books, the black and white joints, will be $80. The color joint, because it's so thick and it's color, that's a little pricey. That's about $1.75.
We could do like $1.50.
The most down we could come down is maybe $1.50. But we definitely want to everybody. I would suggest everybody get on board with that, because this is a way to get everybody off your back ASAP. Nobody can deal with the occupant of the office, and if they mess with you, you just make them trustees, and then all the liability fall on them. They don't want to do that. Trust me. But I don't like saying that. Trust me. But this is how it works. And this is how white people are able to keep all their money, because they're living off of your trust. Excuse me, they living off of your estate. And they broken into your estate and forced you to abandon it. So we got to reestablish those. So like I said, everybody, as we close out with our Moorish prayer, Allah, Father of the universe, Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and equality. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation by night and by day, through his holy prophet, Noble Jew Ali. Amen. Peace, love, and light to everybody. Inshallah, we'll speak again soon. Thank you again for the donations and coming to Sunday school. Selena said if you haven't made one, just let her know. So that way she don't stop sending invites. And again, love and light to you guys. And we're almost there. You know what I mean? Peace.